There is a Solution for That is sponsored by VARC Solutions. VARC Solutions helps small businesses succeed by delivering expert QuickBooks bookkeeping, consulting, quick-based development, and integrated solutions. If you own a small to medium-sized business that uses QuickBooks or QuickBase, the experts at VARC Solutions can help. In business since 1999, with people who care and the knowledge and experience to solve your toughest problems. Visit VARCsolutions.com for all your QuickBooks needs. Welcome back to another edition of There's a Solution for That, where we help small businesses succeed by discussing challenging business problems and best-in-class solutions. All right, welcome everybody. We have an awesome podcast today. We have an amazing guest. His name is Adam Brinkman, and he is from the VARC Solutions team. I'm going to let him do his own little introduction, but we're going to be talking about consultative sales and how to make those more effective, basically solving the problem of bad consultative sales. So, Adam, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. Thank you for allowing me to come on the show and just chat a little bit about, sales in general and helping clients get what they need. So my role here at VARC is I'm our primary contact with Intuit, and so we're an Intuit reseller. In addition to that, I'm also the frontline, along with Casey, our other sales rep, for the services side of things. Being an Intuit firm, an Intuit partner rather, we provide a wide range of services, and then also third-party integrations for everything that QuickBooks products can't do on their own. And so that's our specialty, is helping clients who are in the QuickBooks ecosystem, small and mid-sized businesses, to make the most of their accounting software and really get what they need for their business, rather than having to stress out over, what am I going to do with my bookkeeper today? How am I going to make sure my everything stays in balance? That's where I come in, is to really help them find the right fit.
Right. Very good. Well, I know that, in our business, which is basically QuickBooks, bookkeeping, accounting, very few of the conversations that we have are yes, no.
Almost never.
Right? Yeah.
Almost never.
A lot of times there's a little bit of questioning and going back and forth that has to happen. And so just from we titled this podcast, how to basically make consultative sales work better. So maybe we should kind of define terms. Like, how would you even define what is a consultative sale versus maybe what I would call a normal or maybe a transactional sale? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so what I would probably say is starting with the transactional sale and defining that, right? And for me, in my own experiences in life, anytime I think of a transactional sale, it's more of a feeling than a specific definition.
Right.
Did you walk away from that credit card swipe going, wow, that was a really enjoyable process. I really feel like I have all of my questions answered and everything I need.
For like that clarity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so with a transactional sale, it's really both parties are just coming to an agreement on something and signing on the dotted line. Money exchange hands, services are rendered, and that's it. That's the end of the day. But with a consultative sales process, it is more about the process. It's having a genuine interest in the client's business, what they do, what they sell, how they serve the community, how they serve their customer base, and from that genuine interest, if you really are wanting to know more about how a business operates, that opens up the door to a whole bunch of just natural following questions and open-ended questions that'll really help you to see if you're even able to provide value to the client at the end of the day. And I think if you're going to approach a sales process from a more consultative perspective, it has to be an internal perspective first. Yeah. That it's okay if the sale doesn't close. What matters more is that the client gets what they need, but you're not the client. Right. So you have to take time to slow down and figure out what the client needs. A lot of times, clients don't even know what they need.
Right, that's so true.
And I relate that a lot to parenting, right? Like, I have a 4-year-old, I have 3 kids, and my youngest is 4, and she always thinks that she needs ice cream after dinner. Does she actually need ice cream? No, exactly. But then, I always, not to be a consultative parent, but I always, try to ask some additional questions. Well, why do you want ice cream? And you get pretty standard answers, right? It tastes good.
Yeah.
And it puts a smile on their face. You can see that from their reaction when kids eat ice cream.
I would love to take this podcast home and just like literally sit in front of you and your child and see how this process works.
Yeah. It is definitely, well, I will say, on the kid side, it tends to be pretty transactional. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that would be kind of how I would, form up a foundational concept or idea of consultative sales.
Okay. So it sounds like at the root of all this, it's caring about the customer. That's probably at the heart of this, but it's also about asking really, really good questions. Mm-hmm. Okay. And if you don't have good questions, it's probably going to be pretty hard. One of the things that was kind of going through my mind as you were saying all those things was, in my opinion, I guess there's transactional sales are very appropriate in some environments.
Correct. Yeah.
Consultative sales are better than other environments. I was thinking like when I go to the coffee shop and I go buy a coffee, I don't necessarily want them to say, well, have you thought about the types of beans, that you want to have us roast for you, and more. I just want my coffee.
Right.
I remember my father-in-law, one time going into a Starbucks for the first time ever, and he was just like looking at this wall, and he's like, "Can I just get a coffee?"
Yeah.
I mean, I just want a coffee. Can I just buy coffee? Yes, you may. What size? Large. Here's your money exchange. Or if you're going to, a phone store to buy a new cell phone, yeah, you might have an idea what you already want, and all you want to do is go in, buy it, and walk out. Those are fine.
Yep.
But I think at the same time, right, it could be that you walk in with a certain notion of what kind of a phone you want, and you walk out with a different kind of phone because the consultative salesperson helped you get a better phone or the right phone based on your needs.
Yeah.
I've gone into I've had maybe 4 or 5 cars in my career, and every single time I've thought about I want this certain type of car,
right,
I never end up buying that car. And it has nothing to do with, making a wrong decision. It's more of just like as I've done the research and been helped by really, solid people, yeah, I end up getting a different car. So,
well, and on that thought, it's funny that you say that because I've had the transactional experience with buying a car before, and I always think of the quintessential test drive of a car, right? Which is shocking. Some dealerships don't even offer test drives anymore. But I can remember we were looking for a family car. We needed a third row, and we had found one online. It had all the stuff. We're like, yeah, this is the one. And we went to the dealership, and they drove it around, and you go, okay, it's a lot smaller than it looks online.
Right.
And then we get in, and this feels a lot smaller than we were picturing it in our head, right? And luckily we didn't end up, signing off, but we, that entire sales process, we were not interested in listening to anything that the sales rep wanted to recommend.
Right.
And he was also attempting some consultative, a consultative approach. Well, like,
Right.
How old are the kids?
Are you having any more?
Right?
Yeah. Do you need more space? Do you need a third? Do you need a fourth row?
And in my mind, as the customer, I was thinking, this guy just really wants to sell me something. He's not actually interested. And in reality, I probably could have walked off the lot with a product that was actually a better fit for us, rather than feeling like I got to go back home and research more vehicles. And so I do think the consultative approach in sales, you do have to be open to the transactional sale. Right. There are genuinely clients who come to the table and they do know what they want and they're well informed, or they may also just not really want to talk with other people and be open to exploring deeper thoughts about what they're getting. And a consultative salesman needs to be okay with that. That's, be able to switch into that mode if it's required based on the conversation and the relationship you have with that person.
Yeah, exactly. And there's different personality types. Like I'm I don't know. I think we're probably pretty similar in this. And, we're both we think and we process,
Yeah.
right? And some people they want to know all the details, and other people are like, no, it's an emotion, it's a feeling. I just want it. Can you just give it to me, right?
Yeah.
I don't want all the facts, right? So being able to pick up on that is probably helpful. Because I know that. Let's harp on car salesmen for a while, but going into a dealership where this, the salesperson wants to sell a particular car, they've got a preconceived notion of what they want me to buy, and it's a fine line, right, between asking good questions to discover what somebody is going to want and also what's going to be best for them, versus leading them down a path.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think like you said, that you felt like you were being sold, and I think I'm just reading between the lines here. Imagine that they were like, hey, this is going to fit you really well, right? Right? Like leading questions.
Yeah.
If you felt led, like you're leading me down a path, yeah, I'm going to feel at some point sold on a particular product when maybe I don't want that.
Right.
So let's talk about like some of the ways that a consultative sale conversation can go wrong. Like, what, from your experience, what are those ways that those calls kind of go sideways?
That's a really good question. I think you actually touched on it in something that you just said, which is it's on the expectation side. And so from the salesperson's perspective, we do come into the conversation with bias and expectations, and the best consultative approach is to put your expectations on the just put them on the floor, leave them, come in ready to have a fresh conversation. And that doesn't mean you don't use the knowledge that you've already gained prior to meeting with a client or having a conversation or a discovery call with a client. Hopefully you know their name, right? Hopefully you have a general idea of what they do in their business, and from a high level perspective, what your firm or your company would do for that customer. Based on that knowledge, you also have to be willing to put everything down and just say, hey, well, here's what I think. Here's my expectations. Am I in the ballpark with your expectations? Are we in alignment here? What am I missing? And opening up yourself to not necessarily being exactly correct in everything. Making sure the client knows that you're not a mind reader, but you do want to get to know them so well in the course of the process and what they're looking to do ultimately for their business, that they might actually walk away feeling like, wow, like I really feel like they read my mind a little bit,
Right.
And that comes through multiple conversations. I think that sometimes in the sales process, a lot of reps, they want to get this, they want to close the deal on that one call, and there's a fear behind that, because you're thinking, well, if I get off this call and I don't have an ACH or a payment authorization for whatever it is, or I don't have the agreement in place, then the deal's lost. And I think quite the opposite is true if you're taking a consultative approach. Right. They should want to have another call with you, right, because they're genuinely interested in what you're offering them, and because your needs assessment was correct. Right. And then also understand that clients are going to have their own expectations. You can set them to a degree, but also you have to be willing to meet them where they're at, hold their hand instead of dragging them, and walk with them through the process. And I think it takes a lot of soft skills. I think there's a lot of there's great people skills books out there to learn how to ask good questions, right, have conversations. Something that I've been really grateful for is learning from you, learning from our other sales team members, other business owners and entrepreneurs in the past. Following someone who does have a consultative approach, right, and does have those soft skills, that's a great way to learn how to manage and prevent those uglier sales calls that go sideways, and where expectations aren't quite a good match.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up to that, because one of the things that I remember, this probably goes back, 4 or 5 years, but I remember having a consultative sales call, with this guy who was trying to evaluate our company for bookkeeping services, consulting services, et cetera. And so the heart of my question is about leading versus following during a call, because on this call, this guy in particular, he was maybe unusually aggressive in his agenda. Like, some people are like, what do you need to know? And you're getting it out of them. This guy in particular was like, I want to know this, and then after I answer that, I want to know this. And after that, hey, I want to know this. And so he literally peppered me with questions. He peppered me, like, I want to know this, I want to know this, I want to know this. And at the end, and I was just answering him, I wasn't driving the agenda at all. And I got to the end, and he kind of shocked me with his comment. He's like, this has been the most unstructured sales call that I've ever been on. And you haven't really tried to understand me and my business at all. You haven't asked, like, I've talked to several other people at different companies, and their process of conversation was so much different. But his personality was very aggressive, and he was driving the conversation, and I'm adapting to that, and I'm letting him drive it. But it's like he wanted me to drive at some point. Right. So that was like one of those first wake-up calls, like, oh, I guess I wasn't maybe picking up on something he was doing. But those points that you made, okay, there is an interaction. And so just maybe what are your thoughts about that whole leading versus following in a consultative sales call?
Yeah, so when it comes to leading versus following, I think there are times where following, one of the ways that you can properly follow but also lead is seeking to understand. So, when you hop on a meeting with a client, or you walk into a meeting with a client, and they already have their expectations, they already have their agenda, right? Regardless of body language and just general communication, asking the question back to them, or giving them their answer, feeding them their answer to a question back to them. Those are good ways to make sure that you're assessing understanding so that you can continue the conversation in a productive way. So if they ask this question, XYZ, you can say, okay, I want to make sure I understand you correctly. Did you say ZYX, or did you actually mean XYZ? Oh, no, I said XYZ. Oh, great.
Right.
Great, that makes sense. Okay, I feel like we're on the same page. And the more you use that kind of terminology, hey, let's be on the same page together. I want to understand where you're coming from. The more you seek to understand, the easier that you're going to be understood as you lead the conversation.
Right.
I also think something that's really powerful is making sure you're framing up the conversation at the very beginning, even with the more aggressive clients that maybe, and when I say aggressive, I mean more direct, a personality that's matter of fact, A-type. Those are great clients. Like you want to have those types of clients because they typically know how to communicate their needs actually pretty well. And so you may hop on a meeting, or hop into a meeting or on a call, and they pepper you right out of the gate. And we have to be okay as human beings to say, hey, I really appreciate you sharing all of that. Really quickly, though, I want to make sure you understand who we are. Depending on how that client came to you, maybe it's a warm lead process. Maybe they checked out a website, and then that's what led them, to the call you're having with them. Right. Just saying, hey, have we talked at all yet about kind of who we are and what we do? Yeah. Would you be interested in hearing just a little bit real quick? I want to make sure I get a proper introduction because number one, I don't want to limit anything for you that we might be able to provide and take care of for you. I want to make sure you have a full perspective on who we are, and I only need quick 30 seconds to do that. I don't necessarily tell them I'm only going to take 30 seconds, but just being willing to ask the question back. The person who asks the questions is typically the one steering the conversation. Right. So if you are getting very specific questions that are yes or no answers that you are giving back to the client, another way to take control of the conversation and take leadership over the conversation is to ask them why they're asking those questions. Right. Lead it back to more open-ended questions.
Right. Why is this important to you? Yeah.
How are you currently doing it? Why isn't that working? Right. How are you picturing it ultimately, what's the end point that you're trying to create? So going from closed-ended responses to open-ended questions can help you to feel a little bit more at peace with where the conversation's going. And ultimately, that will show the proper interest and the proper pacing for the client as well as you're getting to know them.
Very cool. Very cool. And it sounds like also just setting the context is like what you said at the very beginning. What are your expectations for this call, right? Are you expecting to walk out of this call with a quote? Or are you trying to get clarity on what you want to buy, right? Or what service is going to be best for you? So, just those basic context settings and assumptions clarification is probably pretty helpful. So let's shift gears here just for a second. I want to talk a bit about probably something that we all in any kind of sales role you're going to get, and that is the person that's on the phone that just wants a quote, right? They just want a ballpark. Especially, if it's something that's not a commodity, okay? How much is this phone? Well, let me give you the price. Here's the phone. This is the price. But with a consulting or a project or a development of some sort, right? There's never one answer. So how do you handle it when somebody just wants a price?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So let me lay out how a typical conversation might go for most people is, hey, so yeah, I just really need a price for this product. Well, yeah, the list price is this. Okay, thanks. And then that's the end of the call.
Right.
Or I'll send you a pricing quote via email, and they get the quote. And then let's say they move forward with the product or the service, and then they call you back a couple days later. Hey, you didn't give me the right quote. And then the conversation ensues. Well, I did based on the answers that the question that you asked. And so, even when someone wants a direct quote, I think asking, kind of dialing it back a little bit and saying, well, the normal quote for this service is this amount. However, there are other considerations. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions?
Right.
So, asking permission to engage is another really good leadership, situation.
Yeah.
Same thing is true. I mean, just in leadership in general, permission-based leadership is way better than positional-based leadership, right? And anyone who's watching, this episode, I'm sure they've had position-based leaders and permission-based leaders, and they always remember the positional ones because of the bad experiences, and they'll always say, that person asked permission. I felt like I was having a conversation. I felt a real relationship. And so permission also, to kind of circle back to the previous question as well, when you want to set the stage properly, asking permission to walk them through the process is really helpful. We provide some pretty complex packaged services that aren't simple. They're very complex. And they're very uncomfortable subjects for a lot of the clients because the clients don't understand. They don't know that they don't have the technical expertise and the technological expertise that goes along with some of the software solutions that we service. And so we have to help put them at ease, and you do that in a lot of ways by just asking permission. Hey, there's a lot that goes into this. It's not just like flipping on a light switch. And I want to take enough of your time to make sure you fully understand, as well as you can, what the service is going to entail. Do I have your permission to kind of walk through some questions with you, gauge where you're at, and get a better understanding of where you want to go? So just that is a very pivotal question in a lot of instances. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I know that like when I have calls like that and somebody's asking for a budget or asking for a range or a quote or whatever, my goal in helping clarify in their mind, is this even a possibility, is to give them at least a range, right? Because some people they have no idea, right? They're just like, this is what I want. I'm trying to get X, this solution. And I don't know, quite frankly, if this is a $1,000 thing or a $10,000 thing or a $100,000 thing, because they're not in the industry. They've never done this type of project before. Mm-hmm. And so I like to give them at least a range, like, hey, on the low end, we're talking about, $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever it is. If it's a middle-sized project, it's maybe this to this, right? If it's a large, it could be 100,000, whatever it is. But I like to kind of give them that range, even though it's not the exact answer they're looking for, because I want to just know, is this customer, do they even have a budget for whatever this thing is that they're asking about, right? Because especially, we deal with small, medium-sized companies, right? And some of them are really small, and they have very, very limited budgets. And, if you're doing consultative projects, which could be, $10,000, $20,000, you want to know up front, does this person think $200 is expensive? In which case, maybe this is not the right solution for you, or maybe we're not the right company for you. And so at least giving them some ballparks can help them feel maybe more at ease. Like, okay, this is in the realm of possibility here. Let's keep the conversation going. Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I typically do that in a lot of instances as well. Product plus services, there's a wide range of, of pricing. It's not going to be just a plug and play usually. But yeah, that's exactly correct. Offering them a range so that they know, well, if we did move forward and it's worst case scenario, right, it could be, tens of thousands. And that also helps to really identify where they're even at in the process as well. Yeah.
Well, and I know that, some salespeople, from my experience, are very sensitive about price, and also, they don't want to be told no, right? So they're just very shy about giving a price if they haven't, quite clearly figured out what they need and what they're wanting. But, sometimes you throw out a price and you're thinking in your head, this is going to be way too expensive. They're just going to say no. And I've thrown out those ranges, and again, it's just been like one of those, oh, what a relief. Because I didn't know if this was going to be a $200,000 thing, right? And so you suddenly give them an appropriate range, and now they're like, oh, great, let's keep talking, right? Because now it's like, okay, I know that I'm going to be able to go back to my boss and say this is a workable deal. So let me ask you maybe more specifically, like, what are those kind of signs that you can pick up, if you're paying attention, during a call, that the sale is going sideways, that this is not going to end well, and maybe how do you get it back on track?
Yeah, so I don't remember where it was that I read that our nonverbal communication is actually the vast majority of our communication. And so live meetings are some of the best environments to really figure out what someone needs. Obviously, it's 2024. A lot of meetings now are done virtually, but even then, there's nonverbal cues. Low eye contact. You can tell if someone's looking at other screens, checking their phone. The lack of engagement, with on the nonverbal side can be that should be a clue that you might be talking about something that's not specifically relevant to the client.
I'm sorry, Adam. Can you repeat yourself? I was actually just checking my email while you were talking. Sorry about that.
That's right.
What were you saying exactly?
That's exactly it. We also being aware of how many people are in the call and what their roles are is super important. We had a call with a vendor of ours and a client who's evaluating that solution. And the client had 3 different departments on the call. He had his accountant, himself as the owner and operator, and then also his dispatcher. And every time we shifted from one department's needs to the other 2 people from the client's firm, they would totally disengage and not listen. And that also lets us know from a consulting standpoint that they actually don't communicate very much. They as a firm, while they all may be on the same page, they're going to have more questions afterwards because they're going to actually start talking off the call about the things they all need together, which means now we're probably going to have another call, which ended up being the case. And so it's things like that just can help you to kind of predict how the conversation is going and where it may ultimately go. I think a lot of times very politely calling out those sorts of things For instance, on that particular meeting, I made it a point to interrupt our vendor very politely to redirect what that vendor was talking about back to something that was relevant to everybody who was on the call, to make sure they understood. And that instantly you could see, oh yeah. And they lean in, right? You see the lean in. They'll start, making physical contact. Really just showing you that, okay, now they're engaged again.
I was just thinking about like Zoom calls, and partway through the camera goes off.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I know I've done that, so I can, guilty. But those are signals, right? Those are signals. Well, let's wrap up this podcast with maybe just one more question in general, which is, you've been doing this for a while. So what's maybe another one or two different tips that you could share with someone that's in that sales role to help them have better discovery calls?
So, number one tip is be yourself. Be yourself. There's tons of great sales influencers out there. I was thinking, we've talked about Grant Cardone before, 10X it, right? Grant Cardone's an amazing salesman. He's an amazing businessman. But I'm not Grant Cardone, and I have no interest in becoming Grant Cardone, and I don't think he'd appreciate that either. It's important for us to live in our own skin, be who we are as people, and have confidence in that. Really lean into that, and then be open to constructive criticism to help you grow as a person and also grow as a sales representative. There are things I don't do particularly well, even to this day, after being with the firm as long as I have, that I constantly chip away at every single day. So that's number one, be yourself. Number two is have confidence in the products that you're selling. You mentioned earlier when you hop on a call and you're giving a quote or a range and you're not even sure how the client's going to respond. I think something that I've learned here specifically at VARC is that I'm allowed to have confidence in the range that I give. I'm allowed to have confidence that if I say something costs, it's going to be a 200-hour project, a 400-hour project, and it's going to cost $50,000. I'm not saying that, I'm not pulling a rabbit out of a hat. It's not a magic trick. I can confidently tell you that is the time, that is the dollar amount, but also having that confidence will give the customer faith to know and understanding to know, oh, wow, he's really serious about the cost. Okay, I need to take a minute to slow down and think about it. And then that also puts you in a position of strength to communicate, that's this cost. We can work on something more specific to you, but be who you are, have confidence. And then last but not least, I would just say be open-minded to learning and growing. I think a constant sales process is a stale sales process. There's new and innovative ways to interact with people. And I've learned something new every day I've been with the firm. And I know that's been the case for you. I've seen you hopping into meetings and calls and sitting down with a client and going, you guys do this for work? That's actually really cool. Tell me more about that. So it's really cool to have when you come with a heart open to learning. The sky's the limit. Then you could learn to sell almost anything.
Well, I think you actually exemplify that to the top there, because just being open minded and asking for feedback. Yeah. How am I doing? Hey, you listened in the call. What could I have done better? Right? And so I'll just say what you said. Yeah, if you just get your mindset, this is the way I'm going to do it, and not try to improve and learn, you're probably not going to be very good, right? So being able to ask questions and have that humility, right, to be able to ask other people for their honest evaluation and not just look for a pat on the back, right? Really, really trying to improve. So, hey, Adam, great conversation. Really appreciate everything you do here, and you're a role model for folks to be an amazing consultative salesperson or rep. So thank you for being on the podcast.
It's very generous praise, Brad. Thanks.
You're welcome. And for everybody else, hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we will see you next time. There is a Solution for That is produced by VARC Solutions. This episode was produced by Ashley White and Aaron Riley. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Watch the video version on youtube.com/TheresaSolutionforThat. Or visit VARCsolutions.com/podcast, where you'll find our entire podcast archive, as well as show notes, links to solution providers, and complete transcripts of every episode. If you love the podcast, please leave a review with your comments.